is time. It is a Wednesday. Chip Patterson joins us, Cover 3 podcast moderator, my friend for many, many years, golf partner occasionally when we used to play golf. So he joins us. All right, there's a number of things I want to get to. I don't want to start with the really bad stuff first. So let's start with Mike Alford, the director of athletics at Florida State, talking to the board of trustees at Florida State, and just kind of having a conversation about how do we buy our way out of the league. An incomplete conversation because no mention of grant of rights happened, but what was your read on all of that?
That Jim Phillips is probably not surprised that this is coming almost. And don't forget, we also had Clemson Athletic Director Graham Neff speaking to the Post and Courier, saying the word urgent when talking about unequal revenue distribution.
Right.
The fact that these two comments would be made in very public settings within 24, 48 hours of each other indicates that this is probably something that's going on behind the scenes. Their support of unequal revenue distribution has now basically become a demand. And so what I'm probably more curious about is, what does Boston College think? What does Syracuse think? Because contractually, they don't have to give up a daggum penny.
Nothing.
You know?
Right.
The paper says that, no, we don't have to do unequal revenue distribution. That's not what we agreed to with this 20-year contract that we signed back in 2016. The issue for Jim Phillips and for the ACC league office is whether or not you think unequal revenue distribution, if you can get it passed and agreed upon by the ACC schools, whether that is going to just delay an inevitability, or whether you're going to really get a commitment from some of your bigger brands, from some of your most valuable programs, at least in terms of a media rights and a television standpoint. Because what I have circled is 2028. Because the issue for the ACC is there are schools that could be coveted by the ACC, by the SEC, and by the Big Ten. And every single other power conference is going to renew their media rights deal before the ACC gets to renew its media rights deal.
Right.
And when you renew the media rights deal, that is an opportune time to expand. A new media rights deal is right in line with the SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma, with the Big Ten adding USC and UCLA, and with the Big 12 adding Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, and UCF. So when you come to the table and you start talking about the next deal, being able to have a North Carolina, a Virginia, if you're the Big Ten, being able to have a Florida State or perhaps a Clemson, if you are the SEC, that could only lead to more money. That is what I think would get those conferences and those university presidents in those conferences to be a little bit more interested in it. So if you are the ACC, you are unsurprised that Florida State and Clemson want to create an unequal revenue distribution. The math you have to make a decision on is whether or not that's going to be enough to be able to prevent what could be a really unstable situation here 5 years down the road.
This may be naive of me, and I understand that you can always buy your way out of a contract. But even at 2028, with a new media deal set to start, let's just say in 2030, okay? Even then, making that announcement, that grant of rights for 6 years to receive no money from media for a Florida State or a Clemson or a North Carolina or Virginia, because the ACC's grant of rights lasts through the end of this contract. I mean, it's not just the buyout. It becomes the buyout plus all of that other money that you're not getting. It would be financial suicide unless you can essentially buy your way out of the grant of rights. And I would imagine that attorneys would have already done that since we have known about this, not just this latest round, but the previous round with Oklahoma and Texas leaving then. Here's my question about the imbalanced payouts from the league to a Florida State or to a Clemson or to Miami or whoever.
Or North Carolina.
North Carolina
is one of the most valuable
no question.
Pieces from a media rights perspective. One of the most valuable brands in all of college sports.
How much can you really bridge the gap? I mean, if Florida State got the high end of the imbalanced payout, you're not making up $30 million. So how much could you really bridge the gap?
I think that I'm not going to be able to run the math on this, but I think that when you're talking about a gap of 30 million, if you could do 10 million more than you were, that's a sizable chunk.
It is.
10 million more than you were making is money that can be applied in ways that can help you remain competitive with those. I mean, these are athletic departments and in particular football programs that are seeing the revenue disparity, and they are seeing it with the size of the analyst staffs. They are seeing it with the size of your evaluation, your recruiting. This is no longer about the fountain in the locker room or the slide at the football facility. I mean, we pointed to all those things when you had to hide the money because the players couldn't get paid.
Right.
I've noticed we have not had as many of these like frou-frou locker room additions. Instead, this is about the staffing that you have within your football program. And to answer the beginning part, you're right. Even at 2028, the number is going to be astronomical.
Yeah.
But every year it does get cheaper.
Sure.
As you go into the future, it gets cheaper to leave. It has been suggested to me that there are programs that might be able to go to a prominent booster who might have a private equity firm. Depending on where we are within the state of college athletics and whether or not major college football players are employees, whether athletic departments even have any tie to a university beyond paying a licensing fee in order to use the name and likeness of the university and the mascot, that private money could end up, and this is going to blow someone's mind. So this has only been suggested to me it's a possible option, but that private money could buy ownership in athletic departments, and in doing so, bankroll the exit from the Atlantic Coast Conference.
So let's just say, I don't think he has the money, but let's just say Burt Reynolds, noted FSU alumni.
It would be John Ruiz. Like, it would be John Ruiz at Miami. Like, Life Wallet has bought a massive stake in the Miami Hurricanes athletic department, or Miami Hurricanes football program, and they are now a part owner of this entity, and in doing so, they have brought to the table enough cash to be able to cover the enormous financial burden of leaving the ACC, all done in the name of eliminating this financial gap that you have with the SEC and the Big Ten.
All right, then if that's what's going to happen, then that is going to happen. But the finances have been what would prevent these schools from doing it. Because from a financial standpoint, from a traditional financial standpoint, there's just no way around not having, by putting yourself $250 million in the hole.
I've got it at 350 right now.
Okay, that's fine. Even worse.
Yeah.
So there's just no way around that. You can make that back at Ohio State or at Texas, or at Georgia in a couple of years, but you can't make that back anywhere else in a couple. There's only a handful of universities whose athletic departments generate that kind of revenue to cover that over less than a 10-year span. We are at a crossroads with all of this. How much does the Pac-12, Chip Patterson is with us as he is on Wednesdays, how much of the Pac-12 and the fact that they are now without, I'm not going to say they're only two flagships, but I don't know what real value is sitting there in any other Pac-12 school since Southern Cal and UCLA are exiting next year.
I would put Oregon and Washington as the next two.
Right.
I would put Oregon and Washington as, large state universities, big flagship state universities. They do invest in their football programs heavily. Yeah. They prioritize their football programs. And, this is why they're so often connected to the Big Ten. They are both members of the secret frat. The secret fraternity of all the really good schools. They call themselves the AAU, but I know it's just the skull and bones of the university presidents or whatever. Right. So, but Oregon and Washington fit the bill for a lot of those things that we normally look at for a potential Big Ten member. They are a logical traveling partner, I guess you could say, even though the distance between the Pacific Northwest and Los Angeles is arguably the same as what you would have from going from Los Angeles. I don't know. I haven't done the math.
To Chicago.
To Nebraska. I was going to say to Champaign, Illinois.
Yeah.
But you add another West Coast presence, you get down to the Pac-12, the corner schools, Colorado, Utah, Arizona State, a set of schools that potentially could be a target for the Big 12. Brett McMurphy of the Action Network had a great point actually on the Solid Verbal podcast with Ty and Dan. He said the Big 12 is in the best position right now, not compared to the SEC and the Big 10, but of the other three Power 5 conferences, is that no one's really looking at these Big 12 schools and wants them. There are ACC schools that are coveted. There are Pac-12 schools that are coveted. But the Big 12, which just added in new members and has a new media rights deal on deck, like that is actually the safest position to be in outside of the SEC and the Big 10, is because no one wants any of the schools that are there. That allows them to be in a position of being aggressive, as the Pac-12 tick, tick, tick still does not have any commitment to each other beyond 2025. And that's why the anxiety is ramping up with the Pac-12. We talk about what might happen in 2030 with the ACC. What about if all of a sudden we get closer to the deadline? That means Oregon and Washington could leave with no penalty.
Right.
That means Oregon and Washington could join the Big Ten with no paperwork. It's like, sorry, deal's up.
Right.
We're out.
We're free agents.
We're free agents.
Unrestricted free agency.
At that point, the Big Ten would have its, new commissioner. We would be in the expanded college football playoff era officially. It's not great for the Pac-12. And here's what I would say: if the Pac-12 announces a new media rights deal that is 8, 9, 10 years long, probably means that Oregon and Washington are comfortable being big fish, little pond in the Pac-12 and maintaining whatever tradition ties they have to the conference, and they are going to continue to try to use that as a competitive advantage. But if the Pac-12 announces a deal that's like 4, 5 years, that's when I start to say, okay, they've got a few more years here.
Yeah.
And then when this deal runs up, then they're going to be gone.